Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Liam Hughes from Biggerplate.com, and I'm delighted to welcome. Feels like I'm catching up with an old friend, actually, Harlan Hugh of TheBrain. We were chatting about. I think the last time we met in person was, I think maybe 2015, 2016, in San Francisco at a Biggerplate event. Harlan is the founder, the inventor, whatever you'd like to call him, of TheBrain. Who have just released version 14, I think they said to me,
That's
Harlan.
correct.
So I thought
Yes.
it'd be a good moment for us to catch up. And ideally, what I'd love to do is maybe give some of the Bigger Plate members who are maybe not yet familiar with TheBrain a little bit of an overview of kind of who you guys are, what you've been doing. I'm really excited always to explore the sort of the overlaps with mind mapping, but I think of TheBrain as being sort of overlaps with mind mapping, but a little bit different. So I'm quite interested to chat with you about that as well. So firstly, Harlan, thanks for agreeing to come on and ramble along with me.
Absolutely. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
No worries. And so maybe let's I tend to like to explore these things a little bit in past, present, and future. So I guess just before we switched on the recording, I said what year was the Brain founded, thinking it was going to be around the same time as lots of the other software companies we work with, and you said 1998, which really surprised me. So maybe if we go right back to the beginning, you've got a version of the Brain invented by you back in 1998. That was the first public
That was
release
the
of the
official
product.
release. Yeah, the company was actually founded in 1996. And then I was working on it personally before that for about 3 years. So,
And
yeah.
so was this like a pet project for you on the side of a real job, as I would say?
Well, I had a real job briefly.
How did that go? Yeah.
It did not go well.
Yeah, same. Yeah, same. Yeah, I can relate to that.
So yeah, I decided that I was going to make my own piece of software, and I wanted to do something that was, interesting. And one day I was talking to my brother, and he said, "So what kind of software are you going to make?" And I was like, Why don't I make something that's like a digital version of your brain?" And it just all kind of came to me in a flash, so to speak. But yeah, this was in the early '90s, and I actually had never heard of mind mapping until well after the company was founded. A few years after the company was founded, somebody showed me the mind mapping book
Right.
by Tony Buzan, of course. I think I still have a copy sitting on my shelf.
Most people I most people I speak to have somewhere in their house got a Tony Buzan book somewhere. Yeah. But
Yeah.
that's kind of interesting though. So you that's kind of interesting to me. I didn't know that because as I say, the Brain, and we'll get you to share your screen maybe in a little bit, and people who aren't familiar with it can kind of see what it looks like. A lot of people will probably say it's mind mapping, but it is different. It's structured different. It
Yeah.
works different. It's giving you some things that mind mapping doesn't. And I think it's kind of interesting to me to know that you didn't have mind mapping as a frame of reference. So you really were starting with how does your own kind of brain organize information? That was your reference point. It wasn't
Exactly.
anything to do with
Yes.
mind mapping. Interesting, right? Okay.
That is correct. Yeah. Yeah. No, the thing that I was trying to do was figure out how to organize information in a way that matched the way that you think about things. That is kind of associatively, right? Whenever you have a concept in your head, kind of related concepts are close by in your head, right? But on a computer, there was no way to do that, right? And all of the different ways that people have been organizing information on the computer, at least back then, were modeled around physical tools. We had the desktop, we had filing cabinets, we had folders, and so
Right.
forth.
Yeah. Well, they were sort of digital versions of what we did in an office. Or I have to say at that stage, I was actually
Exactly.
still at school, not to make you feel old, but yeah. But also I suppose in
I was at school
1990.
too, but
Oh, okay, all right. Yeah, you were probably doing something slightly more meaningful than I was then. But I think also in 1998, I guess you'd be in the real boom that came along. I think was it Windows 95 was the one that really kind of exploded desktop computers sort of usage everywhere in people. So
yeah,
I
yeah.
guess your
Windows
reference
95
points of
made
folders and files was very established by then as well.
right. Yes, yes, yeah. For me, the inspiration was the Mac. I never had one because I couldn't afford it.
Right. Yeah. It was expensive.
Yes, yes. But I thought, Steve Jobs and the way that he thought about things was, really kind of the way to go. But I I never quite understood until much later that the reason why they chose metaphors like the desktop and folders and files and so forth is because it's very hard to get people to think in new ways. So the familiarity of those metaphors is part of what made it useful, right? But they brought along a lot of the limitations of the physical world
Right.
into the digital realm. And that really wasn't necessary, except to kind of match the metaphor, right? So changing the metaphor from the desktop to being the brain or the mind was a way to kind of break free of all of those limitations, right? And the way that the interface works with the kind of central topic that you're thinking about being in the center, and then all of the related information surrounding it, that's where it's very similar to a mind map from a layout perspective, right? The difference is that because it was designed to be a network from the very beginning, I always knew that there was no way that you could put this on a piece of paper in 2 dimensions, right? So I wanted to be able to take advantage of the um, ephemeral nature of the computer display so that you could just like kind of reorganize things every single time you clicked, right? So it wasn't about being able to say, well, I want this piece of information here, and I'm going to put these other things on this part of the page and that part of the page. All of those positioning elements and so forth were dynamically constructed because they weren't meant to kind of be stuck, right? And so it's like an infinite mind map, if you will, right? Every single time you click, the whole thing reorganizes, and you see things from that new perspective. So,
And so
um,
what I've seen over the years of obviously following you guys and the sort of evolution, and a lot of Biggerplate members know and use the brain. We've got some great videos in our library of people showing what they're doing with the brain. It's fascinating. But I
very
think
cool.
particularly what I've seen repeatedly is people when they are not familiar with the brain, but they may be familiar with a mind mapping software product and they try the brain. It takes them a little while to get used to this idea that there isn't the one fixed central topic.
Right,
It
right.
starts there and then you click and it sort of reorients itself every time based on kind of where you're going down the rabbit hole. But I think once people kind of just almost again detach themselves from the mind mapping frame of reference, maybe they start to see how that is reflecting actually, as you say, sort of how things actually tend to just keep rolling on in your brain as you go.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you can think of well, one of the ways I think about a mind map is um, it's a snapshot of what you're thinking when you're focused on a single topic, right? But if you move on from that topic to something else that was related, perhaps a subtopic, perhaps something that's connected to the main topic, but not really a subtopic,
Mm.
that's when things need to shift and reorganize, right? So in mind mapping and in most organization systems, you have kind of subdivisions or containers, right? So each node off of the map is something that's contained within the central topic, and then it branches and branches and branches like a tree, right? But in the brain, each object can have not only children, but also parents, and not just one parent, but multiple
Right.
parents.
And so you've
Um,
it sort of still has elements of that tree structure, but different.
yes.
And that's what I think is interesting. So it'd be great in a second. You've got some documents you can kind of show people how that looks. But before we get into the sort of how it looks, because I think it's always interesting to talk about it and then show it as well. But just take us the sort of the journey then. Just go back to my original start point of the 1998 first product launch, and we are now. I can't even think how much later that is. A long time later. What was the sort of? How did you know when you were kind of onto something that people would actually buy or try out, and how long did it take before you kind of went, okay, I got something here that's engaging people, that people like to work or think in this way?
Yeah. Well, we didn't really know for quite a long time, right? Because uh, when I first started to show people, I was, a little bit careful about who I showed. And eventually I showed the people that became my co-founders, Don Block and Catherine Lefebvre. And that was here in Los Angeles. I'm originally from Canada. So, I had a friend who worked with Dawn, and they flew me down. I showed them the software, and they were just uh, shocked, I would say. They couldn't believe that some kid from Canada was like trying to change the way people were going to use their computers. It was pretty ambitious. And as soon as they saw it, they said, "Don't show anyone else."
Locked you down straight away.
Locked it down. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So then until 1997, December 1997 was when we did the tour to introduce the brain to the world.
Right.
The product came out in January 1998. But yeah, one of the first people we showed was Jerry Mikulski.
Right.
And he's now the owner of the world's largest manually constructed brain.
Right. Yeah.
He's got over 500,000 thoughts inside of it. And yeah, when we showed him, his eyes just lit up and he just was like one step ahead of me. Every time I was about to demo something, he was asking about the next thing.
Interesting. So this was someone who almost was seeing the tool they'd almost always wished they had, but maybe hadn't ever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So
So
that's
then,
when we knew like, hey, this could be interesting, right?
yeah, you're like, well, there's one person who likes it. Let's keep going. Yeah. Yeah. And so it's also fascinating to me. I often talk about the origins of Biggerplate. We launched in 2008, and I always say to people it was a really different era in the internet. Facebook was a
Yeah.
closed environment for universities. It was nowhere near as easy to build payment structures into a website as it is now. We Twitter was sort of a new thing. So 2008, I always say, oh, it was a very different time in the internet. You go to 1998 when you're launching, you're
Yeah.
talking, I'm guessing, sort of CD-ROM installations and things like that, and you're
Oh, yeah.
talking actual boxes of software and things like that. So you've really kind of seen that the well explosion and growth of kind of software as a concept, I suppose, in people's mind, right the way through to, installing software on your phones and things like this. And so
Yeah,
those
absolutely.
early years, what were the biggest challenges in that era of kind of trying to sell and market software?
Well, when I first started making the brain, I didn't know what the internet was, right? If you
Right.
can imagine
Yeah. Yeah. I'm
that.
still trying to figure it out, to be honest. I'm still not sure I know what the internet is.
But we had to incorporate the internet and the web and all that into the software and figure out how
Even in
to
that very early version in the late 90s.
Yes, in the first version of the software, you could drag and drop. Well, actually, you couldn't drag and drop. You couldn't drag and drop into the brain, but you could drag from the brain out to the browser.
Right.
It was so early that the browsers didn't support drag and drop yet, but we could talk to them through an API and ask them what page they were on, right? So you could kind of pull information into the brain from the browser. Um, but yeah, so um, yeah, so it was an early time. We made CDs of the first versions of the software. We still have them lying around somewhere.
Yeah. I've still got a
Um,
couple of trial CDs for the first software of mind mapping I had as well. Yeah.
yeah,
And
and
what
we weren't sure how we were going to sell the software either, right? We prior to the brain, we'd done some other work in the entertainment sector, and we wound up producing boxes and CDs and designing packaging and all that stuff, right? And we thought maybe we'd have to do that for the brain. But as it turns out, we were kind of just at the right period where it was feasible to launch a website and have people put their payment information in and download the software and all that stuff. So, yeah, but it's a much different world today, of course. And it's so much easier to introduce software and get the word out. So,
And so before we jump forward to today, I'm interested to know about sort of customers and users today, but to go back to those sort of earlier years, I guess maybe let's say the first 5 or so years of the journey as an entrepreneur and as a sort of startup, in that period, did you have a
mhm.
clear idea of what was the use case for this product and therefore who were the most likely customers, or was it really kind of putting it out there and trying to figure that out as you went? Did you have a kind of clarity in your mind around the people who will use this are X? Did you have that kind of persona, or was it kind of we built something cool, let's see what other people think of it? How does that kind of play out? Did you know back then like who was gonna who you
Yeah,
were
we
really going to
didn't.
target.
Yeah, no, we didn't really know.
Right.
We just kind of went out there and said, "Hey, this is a great new way to organize your life, and all your digital information can be in one place now." Back then, people kind of thought of each piece of software as the container for their stuff. So, like, all your documents are inside of Word,
Mm.
all of your spreadsheets are inside of Excel, and so forth, right? So uh, now people think a little more conceptually, but I mean, to some degree, that mindset still persists, especially when you go to a phone. Apple, shockingly, uh, kind of embraced that paradigm, right? And separated all your information by the apps that they have, right? But we were all about kind of create a central repository for everything. And instead of organizing around the type of information, it was organizing it around the concepts and the topics, right? Um, so yeah, so that was an evolution, I guess. But in terms of like kind of who we thought would be using the software, we knew that it would be people who are kind of really into their information, right? So people to which um, they thought of knowledge as a key competitive advantage,
Right.
right? We didn't know how to find those people, but eventually they found us.
Yeah. I suppose also with the era of that you're in that stage versus now, not only because the internet is what it is today versus then, but also there's also terminology now and kind of concepts now that are a bit more understood. I don't know enough from that era to say, but I suspect things like personal knowledge management wasn't quite such a concept to
No.
tap into as it is now. And now every tool under the sun is personal knowledge management in some form or other. But it must be
Right.
quite hard to almost kind of find the hooks or the marketing kind of language almost for something that is very different to what people are used to as well. Do you
Yeah.
remember any of the kind of again in those earlier stages? Were there any sort of real like breakthrough moments in the young business that you remember being like, oh, okay, we've just I don't know about turned a corner, but we've maybe got over a hurdle or just jumped up a step or two? Were there any kind of real standout moments on that journey?
I'd say the first time we sold the software to a large kind of enterprise concern, you think of um, kind of early adopters of software as like kind of geeky guys who are in their basement, like, and don't have anything else to do but like find cool software, right?
Yeah,
Guys
right.
and gals. But in the at the opposite end, you have Fortune 500 companies who are rolling out a new form of insurance, or selling real estate, kind of old school businesses, right? And as soon as we started getting interest from those people, that's when we thought, okay, now we've kind of made the journey from the early adopter to
Mm.
the people that are really just trying to take advantage of what's available, right?
Yeah.
And we kind of uh, have have done the whole spectrum. First, when we first launched the software, we were focused on the individual, um, and then as we started to get interest from these large companies, we focused a lot more on the enterprise software. And then today we're kind of uh, back to the main thrust being for individual users, and then that's now kind of much more of a spectrum rather than kind of one and the other, right?
Yeah.
So the software today can start on your individual user's desktop or phone or what have you, and then kind of seamlessly blend into multiple users. So yeah, I mean that aspect of software has evolved also. You don't have the um, enterprise software and the consumer software. It's like they become one.
Yeah. And I guess you've got sort of, I don't know, does that make life easier or harder? I was thinking that makes life easier, but actually it maybe sometimes it's difficult to tell when you're in that process. Okay, are we selling into enterprise? Or are we just selling to a person who's in an enterprise who just wants it for themselves? It's something we have
Yeah.
a little version of at Biggerplate is, we've got members from pretty much every big organization in the world you can think of, but they're signing up as individuals. It's not like
Right.
the big company is saying, "Hey, everyone get on Biggerplate." That's just these individuals have found us because they're going to find. And I guess to try and, if you're selling the software, I suppose the challenge is if you've got 10 individuals from the company, you then say, "Hey, to the company, look, maybe you might want to buy this at a larger scale, and that would be
Right.
good for us."
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, yes. I mean, for us, it tends to happen that, you get a handful of individuals or even just one individual who's really into the software. And then they're like, hey, my whole team can use this.
yeah,
I should, it's kind of spearhead an initiative to get this going, right? Um, but yeah, I mean, from a software design and evolution perspective, focusing on the individual is certainly easier because you get a much faster iteration cycle, right? Like you can get the software out, that person will install it right away, and they'll tell you what they think of it like within a month of having started working on it, right? Whereas if you're deploying to an enterprise, even today, a lot of our enterprise customers are on a version from 3 years ago, right?
yeah.
Because
And
they
they'll
just
hold on to
don't
that version for as long as they can, Harlan. You know that.
exactly. It's working. Don't touch
Yeah,
it.
it's working. Don't break it. Yeah, just don't break it. And I guess that's another sort of part of the software game now that's a bit different, I suppose, is the subscription models and all of the different expectations around software. And I know you guys have got a very good sort of web-based application as well now, which brings with it probably a whole other set of requirements and parameters at an enterprise level that can probably be pretty complicated and possibly sometimes even a bit of a deal breaker or game changer or showstopper, whatever you want to call it, because the expectations, the requirements around security and all of this stuff is probably pretty
Yeah.
fast moving, fast changing,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. I mean,
complicated.
luckily for us, because we kind of evolved from that,
Mm,
we've always had kind of an offline, isolated server offering. So companies that want to use the brain can install the brain on their own systems. They don't have to be on the internet. They don't have to be part of the cloud. They can have their own cloud.
yeah, yeah,
Right. But yeah, I mean, that's obviously something that wasn't around before. Is like the whole
mm,
concept of like, oh, I'm just going to leave all my information on the network,
yeah.
especially for an enterprise, of course.
Nice. So, having probably teased people enough if they're watching this so far in terms of what the brain looks like and how it works, let's bring ourselves up to today then. So, you guys have just released or updated or published, however you'd say it, sort of version 14, the brain 14. So,
Yes.
is that historically followed as sort of an annual update? Is this kind of, or is it just it's
We
14 because it's 14, it's a big release, so it's a new number, or how's it generally played out?
Well, when we started out, I think the aim has always been like once a year, right?
Yeah.
But obviously, it's been more than 14 years.
Mm,
Um, what tends to happen is, when you get a really ambitious release that has a lot of new stuff, it can take a long time, right? So, I think probably the biggest release in terms of the amount of new technology that we packed in was version 9.
right.
And version 8 was built in Java. Version 9 was built in C Sharp. So, like, we had to rewrite the entire thing. I think it
Right.
took us 5 years.
Yeah, okay. So that's where those missing years are. If people say, well, you've been going since 98, but you're on version 14, you say, but one version took 5 years. Yeah, okay. I
Yes,
understand.
yes,
So
yeah,
so
because
what are the sort of the headlines, maybe for those of you watching who are familiar with the brain or unfamiliar with the brain, if you're sort of saying the headlines of this version, what have you packed into this version that's kind of new or improved for somebody who's maybe seen the brain before or used the brain before? What's version
sure.
14 all about? What are the headlines from your perspective?
Well, kind of the marquee feature is the integration of AI, artificial intelligence, of course.
Right.
Everyone knows what that is, but when we released the brain, because it's called the brain, everyone was like, "Oh, it's artificial intelligence, right?" We're like, "No, it's not actually." But so now it's like,
So the expectation was of AI back in 1998 that like, this is artificial intelligence. It's taking you a while to get there, but
yeah,
you're there now. Yeah.
but yeah, no, we would show these ultra sophisticated maps of all your information, and people would say, "Oh, it does that automatically, right?" And we're like, "What year is it
Yeah. Wow.
again?"
Really, that's
But
fascinating.
yeah, now we can do all those things that people dreamed about back in the day, right?
Interesting.
Um,
And so for AI in the brain, is it that it's generating sort of related, connected ideas, or is it helping you sort of refine what you're putting in? How's that kind of working in that space?
It does both actually.
Right. Okay.
So, we can
Is
give
it
it.
easier to show me than to tell me? Or this would this be
It
is
is
this
a
where
little
you
easier
put
to show
yourself
you.
under pressure for live demonstration, Harlan? Is that what you're suggesting? Yeah, I mean, if you want to show it in action, if that's easier for you
Sure.
than trying to explain it, feel free to hit the share screen button.
Let
This
me.
would be a good opportunity as well for people to just get a sense of what. Oh, there you go. So there's a good example of what the brain as a map or a diagram looks like. That is that little bit different to the mind map structure. And then maybe as you
Yes.
maybe give us a quick overview and then show us what AI is doing in the tool now.
Sure. So this is the brain, and this is my brain that I use every day, and I've been using it since this somebody started. So you can see it's got a bunch of different stuff in it. And if I click down through here, each time I click, you can see that everything kind of reorganizes, right? So I'm just going to click down through here into software. You can see I've got all kinds of different software inside of here, and these are all just things that I've come across over the years that have been interesting to me that I wanted to capture.
And
One of
so
the
just to pause you, Harlan, just going back to what
Sure.
you said, where people thought it was artificial intelligence. The thing for people to understand is this map, as they see it on the screen now, this has been over many years. You manually saying this thing is of interest to me. I'm going to capture it, and then over time, you're
That's
starting
right.
to see actually I'm going to categorize this under office suites, and if I click office suites, it's going to unpack these as little pieces that I've captured or wanted to save over the years. And yeah,
That's
right,
right.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can see, office suites.
Yeah, sorry, leading you down a path you might not want to open up. I don't know.
That's okay. But yeah, office suites are connected to productivity. And then productivity, under productivity, we've got organization software. And underneath that, we've got mind mapping software, right? And, these are probably not up to date, but these are some of the things that I've looked at over the years. And then that's connected up to mind mapping. And then under mind mapping, here we've got biggerplate.com. And here's you.
Yeah, fantastic.
So
Yeah.
all of the information is all interconnected and interrelated, right? And if I go back up through mind mapping, what we're going to see here is that here we are. Mind mapping software is kind of the intersection between software and mind mapping. So mind mapping isn't really um, kind of digital in its roots, but rather comes from paper under Tony Buzan. And here we can see that Tony Buzan um, was involved with this company. I don't know how to pronounce that, but
So
and
what you're sort of just illustrating though is what you were talking earlier about. It's just these, people talk about in mind mapping the importance of kind of associative thinking, but actually what you've got here is it
exactly,
feels a little bit like a kind of what I'm often trying to rein in my own thinking is I jump around a lot and sometimes make it very difficult for other people to follow me. But I think what you're showing here is you can kind of jump around, but you're able to almost follow your breadcrumbs and find your way back or keep going down the rabbit hole if you wish.
exactly, yes. And as you go through here, when you come up with a new idea or a new thing that you want to capture, you can easily kind of add that in, right? So here I've got you, and then I can say, I want to write down that we had an interview April 15th for, right? And now when I come in here, here's our interview, and then I can connect this up to interviews. Have a thought for interviews, but now I do. And then
So
open
if
up.
that interview node that you were just adding in there, you've connected it to, or you could have connected it if you'd done a lot of other interviews, and interviews was the headline category, you'd sort of be
Right,
simultaneously connecting this interview with Liam, and Liam is a parent, if you like, for this idea
right,
or this concept, but also interviews is another way, another route, I suppose, you might have found your way to this eventual piece of
exactly,
information.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, I could put this under, let's see.
I guess you could have put it under something like marketing or sort of,
Yeah,
yeah, gotcha. Yeah.
yeah. So here I've got, let's see.
Yeah. Sorry, putting you under pressure and I don't want to mess up your map.
It's
Yeah. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Right. So here's marketing
Right.
departments of the brain technologies, right? Which takes us back to me, right? And then down at the bottom here, you can kind of see kind of where we've been and what we've been looking at. So I can just jump straight back to any of these concepts, right?
Wow. And so with that interview piece that you just added under Liam Hughes, again, for those of people who haven't sort of seen the brain before, this interview will go on to the Biggerplate YouTube channel. So that's
Right.
then maybe a link that you might want to save into this for future reference if you wanted to find it again. So the brain is going to enable me to kind of pull in all of the assets and other stuff related to that 2, 3 keywords I've captured. I'm going to be able, if I want to pull in a lot of extra information into the brain. And that's where it really does become, as you said, Jerry's is the most sort of not extreme, but sort of impressive example of just being able to pull in a huge amount of information from many different sources into one sort of repository.
Right. So I've just gone ahead and did a YouTube search here directly from the software. Here I've got the Biggerplate YouTube channel. I can drag and drop that from here into the brain. And here we have the Biggerplate YouTube channel, right? Now, if I open this up, I can have that integrated directly into the software. So now I can see everything, the map and the content kind of all tied together, right? And if I click on each topic, they all have kind of the content area associated with them. You can go in here and take notes about things. Um, Discussion, history, and future. So over here in the content area, I can add web pages, I can add documents, I can create new content, all of these different things, right? And then I can um, have this information not just on my desktop here, but it's automatically synced to the cloud so that I can view it from my phone or from the website or what have you, right? And then the other thing that I did want to show quickly is how kind of the AI piece of the
Hmm.
software helps drive the whole thing, right? So I've got a brand new brain over here for Biggerplate,
Probably best
and
that you don't absolutely mess up your core map by demonstrating in real time. I've done that many times. It's a bad idea. So yes, clean map. That's a good plan.
yeah, no, the main reason I don't like to demo in my main brain is because I've got so much stuff in there that's like shouldn't really be seen and
Yeah.
is kind
I
of
think you
killing
did very well though. You haven't shown us anything particularly juicy there, so you're safe. You're safe.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, so
there's a
we've got a clean document. So is this Harlan what somebody's going to see if they downloaded the brain and said new document? This is kind of the view they're going to get, isn't it? They're going to say put something in the middle if you like.
correct, correct. So, you create a new brain and you say that whatever the topic you want it to be, and that becomes the central node, right? Um, but yeah, for this example, I was just thinking about the other day. Um, there's a new miniseries or whatever coming out about Benjamin Franklin. I don't know anything about him, so I maybe I want to make a brain about him. So I go in here and I say, I'll put his full name.
Ben to his
Benjamin.
friends though.
I'm sorry.
It's Ben to his friends, but yeah.
Ben to his friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
More formally we should use his full name. Yeah.
Yeah. So here we go. So now I've got Benjamin Franklin. So now I could go out onto the internet and research this and do searches and pull stuff in and whatnot, but I can also go up here and click this AI button. And now it's going to say, what do you want information about? It'll automatically suggest based on what I've already got activated here. And then I'm going to say, I want to create a structure of thoughts all about Ben Franklin. And underneath here we go. It shows kind of what it's creating. And then now we have a pretty nice overview of what he was all about, right? So his early life.
And you as the owner of the
Career.
document can get rid of the bits you don't want or edit and adapt as you wish, change
Exactly.
how things are connected up if you want to structure it differently. But what you've done here is just got off the blank page instantly.
Right, right. So we have a multi-level outline, if you will, of what he's been up to, and then I can I can zoom in on any one of these particular areas and learn more about it, right? So here we've got scientific contributions. Here's electricity experiments and discoveries. I can go in here and say, okay, I want to have more, I want to know more about what he did here, right? So first of all, I'm going to accept these existing results. And then I'm going to go in here and I'm going to click over to here. And I'm going to say, I actually want to see more about what this topic is. So here I've got uh, experiments and discoveries. And I'm going to say, I want to know about Benjamin Franklin's electricity experiments and discoveries. When I click generate note here, you're going to see that it just generates this overview of everything that he did. And then I can go ahead and accept that. And here we have all kinds of information about um, what he did. And there's even a piece up here about the kite. Flew a kite during a thunderstorm. This is like kind of the legendary thing about Benjamin Franklin. So I can go ahead and highlight that or do whatever I want with that piece of information, right? But that's kind of just the beginning of what the AI can do, kind of beyond just generating information from scratch. We can take information that we've already written and ask the AI questions about it or ask it to do things about it, right? So in this case, we have kind of a longish document here, and I want a summary of this information. So I can go up here and say, I want to generate a summary. And now it's made a short summary of what the contents of this note is, right? Um, so that's a really useful way of kind of leveraging the AI to make things for you without asking it to kind of think for you, right? So there's kind of two ways to use AI in the brain. One is to kind of generate new
Right.
ideas or to kind of help you get started and provide a jumping off point. And the other is to kind of refine your information, right? I already have a concept that I want to summarize, or maybe I want to take it and pull out the most important points or action items. And all of these things are kind of built into the software, right? So um, one great example here, let's see here. Oops, accept this one. Swimming techniques and inventions. Okay, so let's have it generate some more information here. Uh, and There we go.
And see, in that case, Harlan, that you've just put there, whereas previously you said, you said generate more, and then you specified electricity and experiments, and you said generate more, but still in the Ben Franklin lane. It
Right.
seems here what you did is say, actually, just give me stuff about swimming techniques
Yep.
from wherever. So you've kind of gone outside of where you started, which was the Benjamin Franklin lane, and you said, actually, I kind of want to explore this thing generally. And it looks like, for a glance, it doesn't look like it's talking about Benjamin Franklin anymore. It's talking about
That is
the broader topic.
that is correct. Yes.
Mm.
So yeah, if I wanted this about Benjamin Franklin, I could go back here and regenerate. And when I generate, I say in the context of Ben Franklin, right? So one of the things about the AI that's important to mention, I guess, is that each time you generate information from the AI system, it's only submitting the information that's inside that dialogue, right? So it doesn't take any of the information inside of your brain or any of your content and submit it to the AI,
Right.
unless you specifically ask it to do so, right? And we're not training on your data either. All your data is your data. It doesn't, it's only in your machine and on your cloud account. You don't even have to send it to the cloud if you don't want to, even to use the AI.
So you're
So
really giving people sort of a control, which I think is what people get unsettled by in terms of the frontier we're on with AI, is it's moving very quickly and it's suddenly appearing in place, and people maybe didn't think in the early stages how was their information being used or reused or training purposes, etc. But I guess functionally, what you've got here is also the ability to, as I said, sort of stay in a lane or sort of jump and change lanes and keep expanding. But then I think the piece that you showed as well, which is really interesting, was the yes, there's the generative aspect, but there's also the, I don't know if summative is a word, but sort of summarizing and reducing down, but what I think of as kind of
Right.
converging. And where I think about that in terms of how I've seen the brain being used over the years is people are using it as a repository of a lot of documents. So to, if you're working on a very big project and you've maybe got statements of work or project proposals, briefing documents, things that are very big, people I've seen will kind of pull all of those into the brain in one way or another. And what they could now do is say, well, I've pulled it in, so I've got the source document, but now give me a give me the summary of what I need to really extract from here. And that's what you're giving people, is the ability to sort of condense what they've got to take in on at a glance as well, which is, I think, as equally important in the sort of AI use cases.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. One great example that is particularly effective is like if you're taking notes on a meeting, for example, and you generate 5 pages of notes. You can not only summarize those, but you can also say, what are the things that I have to do out of this set of notes, right? So yeah, I don't have a great starting point for that, but let's just say inside of here, I wanted to find out what I'm supposed to do based on this information, right? You can click to extract the action items from the notes, and then it will generate a series of checklists of things that you need to do, right? So in this case, it's
I mean, it's
all
pretty amazing what actions it's come out with there. That's pretty good. I like that.
of
Advocate for the, yeah, it's fantastic. All right.
advocate for regular water. Yeah. So
I mean,
yeah,
that's
these
exactly what
are
you were
indeed
about to
action
say.
items.
Obviously, was it? That was exactly what you were about to say. We should all be advocating for filtration more. Yeah. Fantastic. And so, do you find many people are actually using the brain as their kind of productivity system, not just their sort of filing and storage and organizing things? They're actually using it to say, well, yes, I filed and stored in all these different ways, and now what am I actually doing about it? Was that a use case that you've been seeing for many years, and this is just the natural extension of it? Were people using the brain as their kind of, I don't know whether it's getting things done, GTD techniques, or
Oh
just
yeah,
productivity in general? Were people using it as the tool to guide their tasks and actions?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were lucky enough to work with David Allen actually.
Oh, right. Yeah,
Um,
great.
yeah, he's the user of the brain, and a lot of his ideas. Like it was funny when I first read the Getting Things Done book, I was like, man, this guy's like been inside my head. He knows exactly what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, the whole idea, I think he called it clearing your brain or clearing your mind
Yeah.
of taking things that are um, taking up mental space in your head and putting them outside into a trusted system.
Mm.
Um, that was one of the driving ideas behind the development of the brain from the very beginning, right? It was always stressful for me. Like I have all the stuff that I need to think about, all these things I need to keep track of, and I have no way to do it, right? I mean, I can put it on a piece of paper, but if I put it on that piece of paper, I'll maybe never see it again, right? Or a document, right? A Word document or a notepad or something like that.
Mm.
But if you put it inside of a network and you connect that piece of information up to everything else that's related to it, you tend to kind of bump into it or come back to it, right? And also, it's like each node in your brain is like a way of resetting your mind back to that time period, right? Just like people use a mind map to say, here's all my thinking on this particular topic. Um, you can imagine having uh, hundreds or even thousands of mind maps all interconnected, and that's kind of the concept behind the brain. So,
And I think
um,
the other interesting thing, just to pick up on that you talk about there, is the minute you go from having your task on a sort of isolated piece of paper, or for me, I sort of talk a lot about sometimes how to-do lists can be a bit
mhm,
misleading, because sometimes a to-do list, if it's all the same sort of size, it can be misleading because some tasks are actually headlines representing a whole lot of other tasks. But the minute you put them into a sort of network structure, like you say, or a map or a diagram sort of structure, like TheBrain, like Mindmaps, what I also talk about is it takes on a lot of extra context. So the minute you put that task into the brain and you have to, or you choose to connect it to something else, you immediately sort of know immediately a bit more about it just by what it's connected to. You might start to see that you've got a couple of things in the same kind of territory, and you might start to see quick wins, a 2 for 1 that you could take off one action by doing the other one, and these kind of things. And so I'm
Right.
always advocating, whatever your system, whatever your software is, I think particularly the kind of the visual structure and the spatial structures like TheBrain and like mind maps, they really do help you to kind of take those tasks out of isolation and sort of understand where they fit into the bigger scheme of things. And as you say, with yours, you could just have almost infinite task lists, but probably not in a way that's going to overwhelm people.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that we advocate for is to try to create one brain that kind of encompasses most of your life. And one of the benefits of that is like when you make a task list, the brain will recognize automatically concepts in that task list that are already inside your brain, right? We call them unlinked mentions, right? So if I type Liam Hughes into my node of stuff to do, it will automatically highlight that, and I can click on it and go directly to
With
you.
a big red flag, say don't do whatever the task was, just stay away from that guy. It's yeah, it's so it's going to pick up. And was that a pre-AI function? It would always have done that. Well, not always, but that's not an AI function. That's just a
That's
structured information function. It's saying, okay,
correct.
we recognize these two words from somewhere else. They may or may not be connected, but they're going to highlight to you to say yes or no.
Yeah, yeah. So we call those, like I said, unlinked mentions. Basically, anytime that you say the name of a concept that appears elsewhere in your brain, it highlights, and then you can click on it and either explicitly link it up, or just say, I just want to go and visit that and see
Yeah.
what it's all
Or I
about,
guess
right?
choose a way to differentiate them if you wanted to. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of like a automatic version of backlinks.
Yeah.
Just kind of all the rage a few years ago. But basically, anytime you connect something from one thing to or from point A to point B, from point B you can go backward to the other thing, right? But with unlinked mentions, you can go from the text which you or from the from the main content in which you mention something else to that something else. And then when you go to that something else, you can also see all of its unlinked mentions, all of the places that you mentioned that thing
Mm.
from other concepts.
Yeah. And so, just in terms of you said, backlinks sort of were very in vogue, and there has been, I suppose, if we're talking about sort of present for you guys, I guess a couple of questions with sort of whatever time we've got left would be. I asked you earlier in those early days, did you know who the customers were you were going to go and find? And you said, no, we're just going to go out and sort of show it to people and see what we learn. Do you now, 20 plus years later, have if you were going to try and sort of just give us a sense of what is the general use case or user type for the brain, is it possible
Hmm.
to give a sort of general statement around what they're doing with it and what kind of roles they're doing? Or is it so broad and so diverse that there's not really a common thread? Is there anything that you can sort of, what type of people might gravitate towards the brain now that you're a bit clearer on than you may not have been when you started?
Yeah. Well, I would say that the probably the largest group of users, if you were to say, kind of what do you do for a living?
Yeah.
The biggest group of users would be business owners
Right.
or executives, people that run their own companies or are entrepreneurs of some kind.
It's a
Um,
great example. I can absolutely see that because if you,
yeah,
well, as well as anyone, if you are the startup founder or the small business owner, you are
yeah,
always having to cover so many more things than your core skill set. And so to
right,
have a repository that helps you put your hands on these things that you maybe don't think about more than once a year, even in
right.
that kind of role. We were actually having a conversation only yesterday about some things going, oh God, we haven't had to renew that for 2 years. Where's that piece? Where is that? How did we do this last time? How did we do, and to just put your hands on the key thing that says, here's how you did it last time. I can absolutely see that as a great use
Yeah,
case for
yeah.
the
No,
brain. Yeah.
it's self-service knowledge, right? Like um, if you go to a big company and you need help with something, they've got this knowledge base that they've built out over the years that will guide you through things, right? But in that case, it's built by a team for consumption by an audience of thousands, right? But in the case of the brain, it's more like one to one, right? You built it yourself for yourself. So it's like a way of talking to your future self, you know.
And helping your future self out a bit.
Yes.
Yeah, if I did the job now, I'm saving future limb. I try to think about this all the time in running my little business with a lot of pieces moving along. Is you're always trying to think of things you can do now that might make future Liam's life a little bit easier, and actually
Exactly.
being able to kind of have a good storage and structure for putting your hands on key information, and
Yeah.
I can
Yeah. So every
absolutely
time you
see
put
that.
something into your brain, you're helping your future self.
Yeah.
But coming back to your original question, and more broadly, um, the thing that people have in common that are people who are into the brain is they're knowledge collectors. Just like people collect cars or they collect stamps or clothes or shoes or whatever. The brain is for people who like to collect knowledge, right? And sometimes it's for the purpose of running a business. Sometimes it's for the purpose of just pure enjoyment, right?
Yeah.
Like
Hey, that's
I
interesting.
love to know, yeah, you know, I love to know information about tropical fish, right?
Yeah.
So now I've got it all inside my brain, right? Or I need to know information about patents related to clothing, right? And now I've got it all inside my brain, right? So that's really the common thread. And I remember when we first launched the software, Google was just kind of the big thing at the moment. And some people ask me like, "Well, why would I do this? Why don't I just look it up on Google?" And I'm like, well, yeah, if you want the same thing that everyone else wants, then yes, you don't need the brain.
Hmm.
But if what you want is different and specialized, and it's unique to you, then you have to have something like the brain, right?
I think there's an interesting aside to that as well, which is someone who did one of our earliest webinars on Biggerplate. He described something I really love and I've kind of kept in my mind all the time, talking about mind mapping. And I think it may even apply even more to the brain as a sort of structure and diagram type, which is he talked about the difference between search and discovery.
Mhm.
So, if you go to Google and you know what to look for, great. You put it in the bar and it's going to find stuff. It's going to find stuff in that sort of relatively narrow set of parameters that you gave it. Now, if you go
Right,
into a brain the size of your document that you showed us earlier and search, you're going to find stuff that fits that, but attached to that stuff and connected to that stuff is some jumping off points that you may never have thought to have looked for or remembered you even had, and that discovery might actually lead you to something better than what you'd originally started searching for. And I always liked how he kind of said, there's benefits to both, and if you can combine both, so in the brain as a document, you've got the ability to search and be very directive and say, take me to the exact thing I know what I want,
right,
or you might say, search for concepts related to this that I kind of just want to try and think a little bit differently about. Creativity techniques. You could say search creativity techniques, and probably in a document as big as the one you
right.
showed us, you're going to find some interesting things that you sort of forgot you'd collected. You've got this interesting
Yeah,
kind of serendipity that can happen where you put something in a place and go, oh, I forgot about that. And I kind of like this idea of search and discovery. And I think mind maps and document types like the brain are really giving people that option and sort of functionality of both, which I quite like. I can see that
yeah,
stuff.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when you come to a place for discovery like the brain, it's more interactive, right? It's more like a conversation rather than simply a retrieval of information, right? You're getting to the information and then you're finding out, what were the other things that I was thinking about this concept,
Yeah.
and being able to branch off kind of infinitely.
And I guess it's always a tricky one because it's a little bit like I have a mind map dashboard, which is my version of what you showed. It's kind of everything. And the running joke is if it's not Ernest Liam's dashboard, it doesn't exist to him. So it's kind of my source of truth. And the
Yeah,
challenge is when you show people that And I'm sure you have the same with that document you showed us. Sometimes people might go, that's really overwhelming because there's so much, but it makes perfect sense to you. And that's what it's designed for. It's not designed for presenting or showing to other people. But I suppose the other thing that people may feel is to get to that, you have been building it for 20 plus years. And my dashboard has been a document for 10, 15 years probably. So I guess what you've got to try and introduce people to the brain is sort of almost simpler starting points. So if somebody did download the brain today or go and try it on the web, what would you, as the kind of the guy behind it, be saying to people? Start by building out this kind of stuff. Would you say, hey, put your name in the middle and then just think what's going on in your life? Would you have like, what would an intro to the
Yeah.
brain sort of little guide be, do you think? Where would you lead
You
people to
know,
say they're going to get some more immediate kind of, I get it moments?
yeah, the best way to learn the brain and to get it, as you say, is to just start using it. I wouldn't install the software and think, oh, I'm going to map out my entire life like right
Right.
now.
That's the point I'm trying to make. Is when I show people my Liam dashboard, they start to
Yeah,
think that's the objective. And it's like, no,
yeah,
that's not the goal. That's a possible outcome if you keep
right.
working on the same map for a decade. But actually trying to
Yeah.
find more close near term goals is certainly a better
Yeah,
focus.
absolutely. I mean, I would say, pick a project, something you're working on, and start mapping it out, right? And it's naturally going to connect to all the other things, right? So, if I was, developing a new website, for instance, right, I might go out and
There you
say,
go.
okay,
Yeah.
here's five other sites that I'm interested in, and then here's the products that those things sell. Here are the people that are going to help me work on the website. Here's what those people are into. Here are some of the objectives that we want to achieve, right? And then here's the channels, the marketing channels that we're going to start to pull people into this. And it just keeps on branching out and branching out, right? Here's the technologies that we're going to use. Here's where we're going to host it. Here are the other services we want to integrate with. And pretty soon, you've got something that's sprawling, and it's not just about like the website design, but it's also about all the technologies that are going to go into it, all the people that are involved, all of the other objectives within the company that this is going to help fulfill. And you just naturally are going to find, oh, well, I'm going to connect this up to there. I'm going to connect this up to there. And every time you go to add something, you're going to find out that, oh, there's five other things that are connected to this, right? So yeah, I mean, it's really not that hard to start. It's really a matter of kind of a mindset, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you think I have to begin at the finish line, you're never going to get there.
And I guess a little bit like I've said to people talking about mind mapping software, or like you said, is a bit of a shift for some people to just work in this way, is just to even just build the habit of just opening up the brain towards the start of your day. So it's just open on your computer whilst you're doing your emails, whilst you're doing your whatever else. Just, oh, I could drop that in, and that's where I think that the habit is just going to become almost that kind of easy early
Yeah,
on to
yeah.
just
No,
kind of
we're
get in the
we're
habit.
um we're fortunate enough to have a lot of our users are ultra dedicated to the software. It's like the first thing that they
First thing they
they
open, yeah.
start up,
Yep.
and they leave it on all day, and it's like it's their home.
Yeah.
So, but it
I've
doesn't have to be that
I've
way. You
heard
could,
several Biggerplate members who are the brain users say that exact thing. They said it's the first thing I open and the last thing I close, and it's
yeah,
when that's closed at the end of the day, that's like I'm switching off, and I think
yes,
that's a pretty good endorsement for the product, I guess. But Harlan, I don't want to keep you too much longer. I just keep an eye on the time for you, but just give us a sense. Then we're up to version 14. Um,
yes,
Several years after our 1998 launch. In terms of what we are seeing, I guess, broadly in the world, AI is obviously very, very hot topic, and it almost is going to become, I think, if your product doesn't have AI, people are going to ask questions, which is a very funny situation to be in when you go back just a year or two ago. But if you look
right.
at the brain and the journey and the trajectory and the things that are sort of you and your team are paying attention to and maybe getting interested in, and applications and uses of the software that you've built, what does the next kind of few years look like? What's kind of getting your interest, not in terms of what exactly you're going to build, but just kind of where do you think the software is going to have to kind of evolve and sort of pay attention to it as you're
Sure.
planning with your team?
Yeah. Well, I would say the main trend that we've been following and will continue to follow is moving from isolation to connection, right? And not in terms of information, but also people and workspaces and ways of thinking, right? So if you imagine the very first version of the brain that didn't have any network, wasn't connected to the internet, couldn't sync, and so on and so forth, um, all the way up through today, where you have a connected map, which is synchronized across multiple machines, available on the cloud, and so forth. That's kind of just the first step of this evolution, right? The next piece is I have a brain that's shared amongst multiple people. Many people are working inside of it. The concepts inside of it are shared by lots of different people. So when I add something in about a new project, it comes alongside the things that my colleagues have added. And then that's kind of like a local scope, right? So the first one is the individual. The next one is a group of people. And then you go out to a company and then to a community, a country, and the world, right? And things get bigger and bigger and bigger, right?
Mm.
So, without saying too much, you can imagine the kind of implications of that.
And I immediately think of the implications and possibilities, but also the complexities of that. I guess when you're trying to, collaborative type working in any kind of document, actually, so much of it to me, in my experience over the years now of seeing whether it's even Google Docs or mind mapping software, is actually a lot of it boils down to the humans knowing how to behave in a shared document, right? So don't go moving around Harlan's stuff or giving users the ability to lock certain things and this kind of stuff. But yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's very interesting as a sort of general thing that's kind of for you, because I suppose with the brain it can be quite a personal type of document, can't it? I suppose, which might make it sometimes hard to engage people maybe in the document because it's so much Liam's document and it's organized for Liam, that actually to maybe make the document more workable for groups and teams, it would probably, yeah, it's got some sort
yeah.
of people
There's
dynamics in there as not just technical dynamics.
exactly, yeah. The cultural aspects
Cultural,
of
yeah,
software
right.
development are
Yeah,
very important as you
yeah,
take this journey.
yeah. Fascinating. So I guess we've got that trend, and I suppose you've got AI in the tool in a really impressive way, and field is moving so quickly that who knows what you're going to have to sort of just keep abreast with, I guess, over the next year or two as that
Oh
accelerates.
yeah,
But I mean, it's in there and it's in there to stay, I think, is the general trend with AI and in the tools as well. So I guess that's going to be an interesting thing to sort of track and evolve with as it happens.
yeah. I mean, what we're doing with AI in this version is just the beginning, of course. Um, Even today with the technology available, I mean, there's a lot more that we can do and we will do. But even a few months from now, I'm sure there will be new capabilities that no one is imagining just yet.
I'm really enjoying lots of people asking me about AI, and I'm just trying to keep up with the very basics myself. It's just so quick and so all pervasive so quickly as well, that to just keep abreast of what's going on in what worlds. But yeah, it's fascinating to see how you've integrated that into this tool, because I do think there is a risk, not just with mapping software, but with any software, that the urgency to be able to say contains AI may lead to some quite clunky implementations that aren't really focused on what is this doing for the end user.
Right.
It's why is there AI in it? Does it need to have AI in it? It's just,
Yeah.
but you
Yeah.
can really see with what you guys have done that it's been built with very kind of clear intent to support very clear types of situation. And I do like that it's kind of got that generative as well as that sort of, yeah, summarizing and um, yeah,
Yeah.
coaching.
Refining and
Yes, refining, exactly
yeah.
that. Yeah. Yeah, fantastic. Well, that seems like a great point to pause on. I've taken up plenty of your time already, but it's been such a pleasure to catch up with you after so long. but also great to see the product just continuing to evolve. As every time I see your release, I'm always like, oh, what's new, what's happening, and yes, so we'll look forward to whatever comes next for TheBrain, and we'll make sure when this video goes live, we'll share the information with everyone on where to find it.
Great.
But all that remains for me to say is congratulations to you and your team for all your great work as ever, and send my regards to all those people who I know, and say hi to all those people I don't know. But
Very
yeah,
good.
thank you
Thank you,
so
Liam. I
much for your time, Harlan.
appreciate the discussion.
No,
A lot of interesting points, and it's always fun talking about the future and
yes.
what's happening in
Actually, I really
in the
enjoyed talking
space.
about the past. I like talking about the 1998 era of software. That really gets me. I like that. But Harlan, thank you so much. It's been a
Cool.
pleasure, and I'll look forward to seeing what you guys do next. It's always very innovative and interesting to see where you go.
Awesome. Thank you,
All
Liam.
right.